The Smith and the Devil. Once upon a time, there was a smith who had a son, 6 years old, a sturdy and sensible lad. One day the old man was going into the church, and stood in front of a picture of the Last Judgment. And he saw there was a devil, painted there so terrible, so black, with horns and a tail. What a fine devil, he thought. I will go and paint such a devil for myself in the smithy. So he sent for a painter and told him to paint on the doors of the smithy a devil who should be exactly like the same one he had seen in the church. This was done. From this time forward, the old man, whenever he went into the smithy, always looked at the devil and said, "Hail, fellow countryman," and soon after he would go up to the forge, light a fire, and set to work. So he went on living for some 10 years on the most excellent terms with the devil. Then he fell ill and died. His son succeeded him and took over the smithy, but he had no such respect for the devil as his father had. Whenever he went into the early smithy or not, nothing prospered, and instead of greeting the devil kindly, he went and took his very biggest hammer and knocked the devil 3 times on the forehead, and then set to work. When a holy feast day came by, he went into the church and lit a taper in front of the saints. But as he approached the devil, he spat on him. For 3 whole years this went on, and every day he greeted the unclean spirit with a hammer and spat on him. The devil was very patient. He endured all this maltreatment. At last it became very unbearing, and he would stand it no longer. Time is up, he thought. I must put an end to such contemptuous treatment. So the devil turned himself into a fine lad and came into the smithy. "How do you do, uncle?" he said. "Very well, thank you. Will you take me into the smithy as an apprentice? I will heat your coals and I will blow your bellows." Well, the smithy was very glad. "I certainly will," he said. 2 heads are better than 1. So the devil turned into apprentice, and he lived a month with him, and soon got to know all the smith's work better than the master himself, and whatever the master could not do, he instantly carried out. Oh, it was a fine sight, and the smith so grew to love him, and was so content with him, I cannot tell you how much. One day he did not come into the smithy, and left his underling to do the work, and it was done. Once when the master was not home, and only the workman was left in the smithy, he saw an old rich lady passing by. He bobbed out his head and cried, "Hail there! There is new work to be done, old folks to be turned into young." Out skipped the old lady, and into the smithy. "What are you saying you can do? Is that really true? Do you mean it? Are you mad?" she asked the boy. "No reason to start lecturing me," the evil spirit answered. "If I didn't know how, I should not have summoned you." "What would it cost?" the rich woman asked. "It would cost 500 rubles. Well, there is the money. Turn me into a young woman." The evil spirit took the money and sent the coachman into the village to get 2 buckets of milk, and he seized the lady by the legs with his pincers, threw her into the forge, and burned all of her up. Nothing but bones were left. When the 2 tubs of milk came, he emptied it into a pail, collected all the bones, and threw them into the milk. Lo and behold, in 3 minutes, out the old lady came, young, yes, alive and young, and so beautiful. She went, sat down, and drove home. Went to her husband, and he fixed his eyes on her, and he didn't know his wife. "What's the matter? Have you lost your eyesight?" the lady asked. "Don't you see it? It's I, young and stately. I don't want to have an old husband. Go at once into the smith and ask them to forge you young, and you won't know yourself." What could the husband do? Husbands must obey, and so off he drove. In the meantime, the smith had returned home and went into the smithy. He went, and there was no sign of the man. He looked for him everywhere, asked everyone, questioned them, but it was no good. All trace had vanished. So he went to work himself and began hammering. Then the husband drove up and straight to the smith. "Make a young man of me, please." "Are you in your senses, master? How can I make a young man of you?" "Oh, you know how to do it." "I really have no idea." "Liar! Fool! Swindler! Why, you turned my old woman into a young one. Do the same by me. Otherwise life with her won't be worth living. But I have not seen your wife. Never mind. Your young man saw her, and if he understood how to manage the work, surely you can. As the craftsmen understand yet, set to work quickly, unless you want to taste words of me and birched. So the smith had no choice but to transform the master. So he quietly asked the coachman what his man had done to the lady, and thought, well, I don't mind, I will do the same. It may come out to the same tune, it may not. I must look out for myself. So he stripped the lord to his skin, clutched his legs with the nippers, threw him into the forge, and began blowing the bellows, and burned him to ashes. Afterwards he threw the bones, hurled them all in the milk, and began watching. Would a young master emerge from the bath? And he waited 1 hour, and another hour. Nothing happened. Looked at the little tub. All the little bones were floating around in burned pieces. And what was the lady doing? She sent messages to the smithy. When was the master to be turned out? And the poor smith answered that the master had wished her a long life. And you may imagine what they thought of this. Soon she learned that all the smith had done had been to burn her husband to bits and not make him young. And she was very angry indeed, sent her body servants and ordered them to take the smith to the gallows. The order was given, and the thing was done. The attendants surrounded the smith, laid hold of him, and took him to the gallows. Then the same young man who had acted as a hand to the smith came and asked, "Where are they taking you, master?" "They're going to hang me," the smith said, and he explained what happened. "Oh, never mind, uncle," said the unholy spirit. "Swear that you will never strike me again with your hammer, and I will secure you such honor as your father had. The lady's husband shall rise young and in full health." The smith swore and made an oath that he would never raise his hammer again on the devil, and would give him every honor. The workmen ran to the smithy, and soon returned with the husband, crying out to the servants to stop and not hang the smith. For there was the master. He was untied the ropes and set the smith free. The young thereafter never spat on the devil and beat him with the hammer, but his workman vanished and was never seen again. The master and mistress lived on and experienced good in their life, and they are still alive, if they are not dead.